Would old school vintage garden tractors sell well here in 2025? Let's find out in today's video. So I was texting with my brother, as I often do. We'll text pretty much every day. And one of the things we often will talk about in text is vintage garden tractors. We're both huge fans. We both have quite a few vintage garden tractors, and it's something that we have in common. So the topic got brought up. Would vintage garden tractors from the 60s, 70s, 80s, if you took them and placed them in today, 2025 market, would they sell and how would they do? So I got to thinking about all the current offerings on the market today. The diesel subcompacts with their four-wheel drive and all the amenities that the users have come to know and love and have come to expect from a modern tractor. People have gotten so used to these things with a simple two-wheel drive air-cooled garden tractor of the past even sell at all today. So a great example of this would be pickup trucks from the 1970s. Back then, two-wheel drive pickup trucks with crank windows and very basic interiors were the norm. If you wanted a four-wheel drive or something fancy, you would have had to special order that baby. Moving forward to today, 2025, pretty much every truck you're going to get is going to be four-wheel drive. It's going to have all kinds of fancy features. It's going to have heated leather seats and all kinds of fancy gadgets inside the cab. Can you even order a two-wheel drive crank window truck anymore? Can you order a truck with a manual transmission? No one wants those basic kind of options on trucks, and tractors is no different. I mean, it is cool to think about. Think about your rugged garden tractors from when you were a kid. Think how exciting it was as a young lad going onto the showroom floor at these tractor dealerships and seeing these rugged beasts with their big tires, their rugged features, their all steel construction. Imagine being able to have one for your very own. They were so common back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. They were the go-to machine that homesteaders would use to take care of their properties, whether it be plowing snow, mowing grass, leaf cleanup, tilling the springtime garden. Men and women from that era would use these machines to do all these year-round chores. And back then, they didn't really have the four-wheel drive, diesel, subcompacts that they have today, but somehow they made them work. So I got to thinking about it, and there's a lot of benefits to owning these old rugged garden tractors. They're a lot simpler to work on. You don't need all these expensive, fancy diagnostic tools. They don't have all these computer gadgets that can go wrong and be costly and expensive to repair. And overall, I just think that they're a real nice, easy, simple to work on, rugged yet reliable machine to take care of your property. So yes, there are brands like John Deere that offer garden tractors, but to me, they're just not similar to these vintage beasts of the past. These kind of tractors will always hold a special place in our hearts because as kids, we would run around the yard in the summertime with that fresh mowed grass. You'd see your father or your mother or your grandfather or whoever mowing with these tractors, and these just have a nostalgic place in our hearts that can't be overtaken by the modern offerings. Honestly, I think it's a pretty easy question to answer as to whether or not these would sell well or sell at all in today's market. It really is going to boil down to just one thing. One item is going to make the difference as to whether or not this would work. And that one thing is going to be, what would the price of these machines be? Because let's be honest, if the price of this is comparable or close to a four-wheel drive diesel subcompact, no one's going to choose one of these over a diesel four-wheel drive. It's just the reality of the situation. So I got to thinking, back in my video where I talked about inflation and I took vintage garden tractors from, like I said, those years, the 60s, 70s, 80s, punched them into an inflation calculator with their original price. And a lot of those tractors today in 2025 would be somewhere in the $15,000 to even $20,000 range. Keep in mind, that's a two-wheel drive, air-cooled garden tractor. So if you can buy a diesel four-wheel drive subcompact, maybe even with a loader for 20 grand, why would anyone spend 15 to 20 grand on a tractor like this? The reality is they wouldn't. Some people may do it just because of the nostalgia. Maybe they have money to waste and they don't really care about all those features. They just want that kind of tractor, but the vast majority of people would choose the four-wheel drive diesel tractor. So what does that mean for these old tractors? It means that these old vintage garden tractors like this Case Ingersoll 448, maybe a Boland's tube frame or a Boland's large frame, a John Deere 300 series, a Wheelhorse C series, the Cub Cadets, any of these old vintage type garden tractors, the only way they would sell well in today's market would be if they were considerably cheaper than larger, more capable diesel offerings. What percentage cheaper would they have to be? I'm going to say probably 50% or less of a diesel tractor. So if a diesel four-wheel drive is going for 20 grand, these would have to come in at no more, in my opinion, than probably 10 grand for them to have any chance of selling a decent amount of them to the public. So that begs the question, could tractor manufacturers make money manufacturing and selling these at $10,000? Would there be any kind of real profit to be had? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not an expert at what it costs to manufacture one of these types of garden tractors. I would imagine that that's probably a low number. With today's economy, you got to figure things like red tape, the amount of government BS you got to do, the cost to manufacture and set up shops and tooling and dyeing, the cost of employees to work for you. There's probably going to be a lot of unions, so there's going to be higher rates per hour for people to work. I'm going to venture out and guess that at $10,000, it probably couldn't make enough money on these tractors to make it worthwhile to sell. I think it would be a really cool and novel idea, but I just don't realistically seeing it being feasible. And then you're going to factor in all the other competition on the other end of the spectrum is the cheap throwaway type machines, your box store mowers. These aren't true garden tractors by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of people are going to buy them because the price is really low. A lot of people are going to navigate towards that end because of the cost. They're not going to want to spend 20 grand on a tractor, but they still want to mow their grass or do a couple little things, maybe pull a cart. So they might be willing to spend 2, 3, 4 grand on a box store mower. No, it's not going to be a true garden tractor, but it's also inexpensive to purchase. And the mindset of most people nowadays is after a few years, they'll just throw it away. It's going to lead us into our final verdict, our final thoughts. Would these kind of old school vintage garden tractors sell well in today's economy? As cool as I think it would be, I would love to see these kind of old, simple garden tractors make a big comeback. I just don't think it's reality. I don't think there's much of a place in the market for overbuilt, simple designs here in 2025. People have come to expect fancy gadgets, loads of features, all kinds of extras and goodies. They don't really care as much about the quality of the build and the ruggedness of the build. All they care about is price and or features. So I think there are a small amount of people, a small amount of diehards like us that would buy these vintage garden tractors if they were to become new in the market. I think the vast majority of people just wouldn't be willing to cough up the coin you'd have to get a quality built tractor like this Case Ingersoll 448. So let me know in the comments below, do you think it would be cool if they brought back these vintage old school garden tractors and they were able to make them new for 2025? I think it would be awesome. But like I said, I just don't think it's feasible that it would work. Do you think it would work? Do you think it wouldn't work? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.